Hello and welcome to this session on Urban World. We're going to be looking at patterns of urban change, all the stuff to do with Rio, London and sustainable urban living. And as before, I have included this logo here to remind you to do pause, rewind, etc. this clip in case you do miss anything. To move on with the course then, very quickly, you know that it's made of 3 papers. The first paper is all to do with physical geography, which includes natural hazards, ecosystems, coasts and rivers. The second paper is all to do with human geography, which we'll be looking at today, urban world and Rio, that's what we're looking at today, economic world, resource management, which includes energy. And finally, that third paper includes the issue evaluation, which changes every year, and also then those 2 pieces of fieldwork, Barnsley and Mappleton. Today, though, we'll be going through the urban world section where we're going to start with patterns of urban change, then we'll look at Rio, London, and finally finishing with sustainable urban living. So to begin with, patterns of urban change. When you take a look at this graph, you can see 2 colours. You can see HICs in blue and you can see LICs in black. And it's very clear to distinguish straight away that LICs is clearly increasing rapidly. And here we're looking at urban population in billions. The first thing to point out is that LICs have a lot more people than HICs. So this isn't by percentage, this is in terms of billions of people. But what we can see here, from about the year 1975, the LICs have increased rapidly their urban populations, whereas HICs haven't really increased rapidly at all. In fact, actually in around 1975, HICs have started to level off rather than increase rapidly. Now we're going to explore why that is, but just from this graph you need to interpret that in 1975 the urban population in LICs has rapidly increased, whereas in HICs it's pretty much stayed the same throughout all the years 1950 to the year 2000. Why are LICs and NEEs rapidly urbanising them? So first of all, there's lots of jobs in city centres. That's why people are moving there. Second of all, there's schools and education in the cities in LICs and NEEs. There's also better housing. There's transport opportunities so people can get from A to B much more quickly. And there's also clean water in the cities. Whereas in the rural areas, there are fewer jobs. In the rural areas, there are fewer schools. In the rural areas, housing is of lesser quality. There's limited transport and the water in rural areas in the NEEs and LICs is often dirty. So people are dying of cholera. That's why they are urbanising into towns and cities. This is a great opportunity here to demonstrate your understanding. Don't just say that there are jobs in a city, which is why people urbanise. Say that there are high-paying jobs, therefore more people can contribute to pay tax. Also, don't just say there are schools. Say, therefore, people can get better qualifications. As a result, they can get better, higher-paid jobs in the future and therefore earn more tax, which will support the government. Be really, really clear with your understanding. Don't presume that people can read your mind. Are these the reasons, though, why people are moving into cities in HICs like our country? No, people don't move to cities for jobs in this country. People don't move to cities for better education and better housing and clean water and better transport. We have all of this in rural areas. In fact, we have jobs, education, healthcare. All of these things exist all around our country, which is why people are no longer moving to cities in HICs. We actually moved to cities back in the 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution. Now, something called counter-urbanisation is happening in HICs. That means, due to better transport, because cities are overcrowded, because the houses can be bigger in rural areas, there's lots of litter in cities, and finally lots of cities becoming derelict and run down. People are actually doing the opposite, and people are moving away from the cities in HICs. This process is called counter-urbanisation. And again, use this as an opportunity to fully explain yourself. Don't just say that people counter-urbanise in HICs because there's bigger houses. Say, due to the larger house with a garden, people can have children in a safer environment rather than the city centre. Or due to overcrowding, there's limited opportunities to fit yourself on a train, or it might be overcrowded, therefore you can't get to work quickly and there's traffic congestion. As a result, people are moving out of cities and beginning to counter-urbanise. What is natural increase? If we take the number of people born in a day, imagine if that was 10, and imagine then if the number of people that died during a day was 8, the natural increase there would be 2. Whereas, if the number of people who were born was 10, and the amount of people that died in a day was 12, the natural decrease there would be a decrease of -2. What is a megacity? We know that a megacity is a city with 10 million plus people. And megacities are found all the way around the world. As the global population increases, more megacities are popping up everywhere. Specifically, if we put a large compass over Asia here, we can see that a large majority of our megacities in the world exist in Southeast and South Asia. There's also a few in North America, there are a few in Europe, and also a few in Southeast South America. In the future, we expect as Africa develops that most megacities in the future will appear in Africa. Rio is a megacity, which we'll explore in a second, but I just want to highlight here Rio's position within Brazil. Brasilia, the capital, is here. And that isn't as big city as Rio, because Rio is located on the coast, which means more people would like to live there as there are more jobs for trade and tourism there. It has fantastic access to the sea and therefore can trade with other countries. Let's move on to Rio then and really look at its urban growth and challenges created by that urban growth, with loads of people either migrating in from other countries or due to urbanisation from rural areas. What challenges is that creating? People are moving to Rio because there are better jobs. After all, it's a newly emerging economy. They are moving because there is better education there for children. There is better quality housing than rural areas. There is better transport than rural areas in Rio. And finally, you are more likely to get clean water in Rio, the city, than you are the rural areas surrounding it. That is making people migrate there. In terms of the jobs, specifically, we know that the steel industry is huge in Rio, which is why people are moving to work in that sector. As a result, though, because all these people are moving there, that is creating inequality, where you have a large poor population and a large rich population with very limited in between. Due to there being fewer formal jobs, people are now partaking in illegal jobs, which is called the informal economy. And with the informal economy, that also includes jobs such as being involved in drug trafficking, which is creating this challenge: pacification. The police are having to heavily invest in specially designed forces that are going into favelas and trying clearing out the drug lords, which is fantastic because it's getting rid of the crime. However, unfortunately, some people are being killed in the crossfire who are innocent, and that is creating conflict. So these challenges are being created. We know that healthcare is becoming an issue because there's more people, therefore we don't have enough hospitals or spaces or doctors to take care of them. There's not enough fresh water available for the increasing population. And finally, it's challenging in schools because as there's more children, there's fewer places in schools, so schools are becoming overcrowded and qualifications are going down. So if we summarise the challenges, we know that healthcare is a massive challenge. In fact, only 55% of people have access to it. So the solution to that they're trying to put in place to reduce it being a challenge is they're putting health kits in people's homes. That will mean that fewer people need to go to hospital, and therefore, if you have a serious injury, you can be taken care of. We know that education's an issue, so what they're actually doing in Rio is they are asking for volunteers to help in schools to increase the number of teachers and increase the opportunities for students to get better qualifications. Water supply is an issue. Only 12% of people do not have access to running water. So what they're doing is they are installing 300 kilometres of new pipelines to provide that fresh running water to the areas that need it. And also energy is in demand because there's more people, there's more electricity required. Therefore, what they're doing is creating new nuclear generators to meet that increasing energy demand. However, in the long run, despite these solutions being put in place, if Rio's population continues to increase, these challenges will only become more. What are the environmental challenges then? If there's more and more people, we know that traffic congestion is going to be an issue with air pollution. So the solution to put in place for that is they are expanding the metro system. That means they are increasing the public transport system. Therefore, there are fewer cars on the road. Therefore, there's less traffic congestion and people can get to work. But there's also less air pollution because you might be able to get 1,000 people on a train rather than 1,000 cars. We know that water pollution is an issue. 55 rivers are heavily polluted. So what are they doing? They've built 12 new sewage works to solve that problem. And finally, waste pollution is an issue as well. If there's more people, there's more waste. Just things like litter and also sewage from people. So what they're doing is they have created power plants, and these kill two birds with one stone because the power plant is generating electricity from burning rotting rubbish. That's a fantastic way to solve the problem of waste pollution. But again, if the population of Rio continues to increase, in the future, these challenges will only increase again. What is your example of an urban planning scheme used to improve quality of life? That is the Favela Barrio project. That is a scheme that has been developed to improve the living conditions of people in the favelas. And you can see some photographs of the Favela Barrio project here. You can see on the left-hand side there what some of the streets in the favelas used to look like, and now they have converted them and they've designed them to look much more appealing and much more safe, with less litter, less glass shards running around so that people feel more comfortable there. They have also converted what was a rubbish dump in the favelas to a skate park. That means, again, you're killing two birds with one stone. You are cleaning up the area, so you're having less environmental damage, but you're also increasing the number of young people who have access to facilities like this, reducing their opportunities of being pulled into crime. They've also increased the number of sporting facilities. I love this picture because you can literally see how they have chiseled out a running track and football pitch within the side of a cliff. And that is meaning that young people are putting their energy into sport and fitness rather than crime. They've also improved waterways. Now, I appreciate on this photo, you think, well, sir, that's an open sewer. Yes, it is an open sewer, but that's much better than litter being deposited here rather, it's in the water that they can be washed away, reducing the chances of disease. They've also installed a cable car. Now, they've installed a cable car rather than roads because, as you can see there, they don't need as much space to install a cable car. And what that means is that people in the favelas can access the city with the higher paying jobs and go back to the favelas and actually improve them. It's also known that people in favelas can have one free trip on the cable car a day. So even really, really low income families can access the city. Has the Favela Barrio project then been a success? The successes are that the health and standards of living have improved as a result. Unfortunately, though, when they redid the favelas to improve them, they didn't train residents, the people that live there, to manage the repairs or damage to them in the future. So now lots of them are actually falling into disrepair. But also another good thing is that they've increased the number of children that are going into school. However, the teachers that are working there don't necessarily have the skills to improve literacy rates. Therefore, the children in school but not necessarily getting a better education. And property values have increased, which is also really good because if you own the property, then you can sell it for more money. However, what that then means is that people are actually priced out of the favelas and you might actually be increasing the challenge of homelessness. Again, do use this as an opportunity to fully demonstrate your understanding. Don't just state what's there on the screen. Make sure you're fully explaining your understanding. Moving on to London then. Now we're going to be looking at urban growth again in London and the challenges and opportunities created here in a HIC. First of all, we need to understand the distribution of the UK's population. On this map, you can see that the blue areas are areas which are densely populated. These are areas which have over 150 people per kilometre squared, whereas the yellow areas are going to be more sparsely populated. That means that fewer people live there, just 0 to 10 people per kilometre squared. Why is it like this then? Why is it that the southeast is so densely populated and the northwest is so sparsely populated? The reason's this. In the northwest, we know it's very, very mountainous. You could build on mountains, but it's just very expensive. It's actually cheaper and easier to build on flat land, which exists in the southeast. And also, we know that the River Thames exists along there in the southeast, meaning that a long, long time ago, before factories even existed, the flatland was easy to build on, and you also had access to water for drinking and cleaning, which was a really, really brilliant way to develop society. Then, eventually in the 1800s, they thought it was sensible to build the factories next to rivers during the Industrial Revolution. That meant that boats could go up and down the River Thames, and as a result, cities were born. And that also happened in places like Manchester, in Leeds, in Sheffield, where there are also rivers with factories on them. London's changing though. London's changing both positively, they are the opportunities, and negatively, they are the challenges. In an exam question, it may talk about the opportunities in London, and you need to be able to understand that the word opportunity, straight away in your head, you should be thinking gentrification, regeneration, urban transport scheme, and urban greening. And I'm going to go through each of these four now. First of all, gentrification we know happened in Shoreditch. Gentrification is improving an area to appeal to the middle class. And it was fantastic. We went from this to this in Shoreditch, which was great because young professionals could benefit from high-paying jobs in the IT industry. They could also benefit from the pubs and clubs that were located there. Also then, the owners of these converted warehouses did really, really well because they could now charge rent for the shops, for the accommodation, higher prices for rent, which was excellent for their income. Unfortunately, though, those low-income families can't afford those rising house prices, so are actually having to leave the area. Regeneration is improving an area that's experienced a period of decline. We can see here, this is the London Docklands, and what used to be there was a series of docklands where boats used to come up and unload their cargo from the West Indies. Right next to that is also Newham, which has been regenerated for the London Olympics. So these two go hand in hand. And what have been the successes of that? Well, they've improved these areas that are experiencing a period of decline, and it's created loads and loads of jobs. Specifically, in the London Olympics, there was 10,000 jobs that have been created in the shopping centre that has been built next to the Olympic Park. Also, the aquatic centre there, which I'm circling now, the aquatic centre can now be used by the local population, improving their health, therefore increasing their life expectancy and reducing pressure on the healthcare system. Unfortunately, though, the land that was once prior to the London Olympics did have to be decontaminated from previous chemical use, which was very expensive. Our integrated transport system is Crossrail. We know that Crossrail goes from east to west London with 7 new stations, and it's brilliant because it's created 55,000 full-time jobs, and it's also then increased the house prices around stations. That means that people can sell their house for more money. Unfortunately, though, what that means is if the house prices are increasing and you are a first-time buyer, it's going to be very difficult for you to afford those higher-priced homes, and also the homes around the train line itself, so not on the station but the train track, have actually decreased in price due to the noise. That isn't very good for homeowners there. And finally, urban greening then is our final opportunity. We know that urban greening is the creating of green spaces in and around a city. You can see this building in particular has had loads of green space literally put onto the building, but it may also be creating fields and trees and small parks within a city. And it's great because we know that trees photosynthesize, changing CO2 into oxygen. Therefore, that is going to reduce the rate of climate change and also breathing difficulties for people, so people won't get things such as asthma and bronchitis. And finally, during work time in cities, people can go into the green spaces, feel calm, socialise, reducing stress, and then go back into their office and be more productive due to that. Unfortunately, though, the only bad thing about urban greening is that it simply takes up space in some areas and the trees can take quite a while to grow sometimes. What are our urban challenges then? Our urban challenges, again, if you see this word, we should be thinking inequalities in housing, education and employment, urban sprawl and pollution, London's pollution problem. And again, I'm now going to go through each of these to make you fully aware of what they are. First of all is inequalities. We have looked and compared Newham, a very rundown part of London, compared to Kensington and Chelsea. And straight away we can see that Newham is much poorer. It's much poorer. There are no street lights, whereas on the other photograph in Kensington and Chelsea, we can see those street lights. We can see boarded up windows, which suggest there's a lot of crime in the area, compared to these actually protected windows with glass. We can also see that there is limited green space and gardens, whereas there's a huge park there, which is fenced off by a fence for security. And there's also lots of expensive cars, whereas we can't even see driveways here because it is a rundown area. That therefore means that possibly housing, education, health and employment are going to be worse in Newham than they are in Kensington and Chelsea. When we look at the specific differences in Newham, Kensington and Chelsea, we can see them here. The life expectancy is significantly different, significant by 7 years. You are more likely to live 7 years longer in Kensington and Chelsea than you are in Newham. Also, nearly 10% of people are unemployed in Newham compared to only 4% in Kensington and Chelsea, and that is probably due to the number of people leaving school with good GCSEs. 80% of people are leaving school with at least 5 good GCSEs in Kensington and Chelsea compared to just 60% in Newham. Now you need to try and look at these stats and compare and link them together. For example, if 60% of people are leaving school with only 5 good GCSEs, that must mean there is more crime. And as a result, people are unemployed. So these factors do link together. And if you can explain that in an explanation, you're going to be really, really on track for doing well. What is urban sprawl? Urban sprawl is the outward movement of a city due to urban growth. So it is the spreading outwards. And that can be bad because it's actually going to destroy green landscape. To overcome these challenges, we can do 2 things. We can build on greenfield sites and we can build on brownfield sites. And there's both positives and negatives to each of these. If we build on a greenfield site on the outside skirts of a city, you can have a larger family home with gardens, and it's also safer. But unfortunately, it does deforest an area, which is going to increase CO2 in the rate of global warming. And with that, habitats are destroyed, reducing biodiversity. But if you build on a brownfield site there, we know that cars are actually not needed because you're closer to the city centre and no deforestation is required. So it's a win-win. Unfortunately, though, it is more expensive to build on a brownfield site than a greenfield site due to the proximity to the city centre. And there is also a higher crime rate, and your home is naturally going to be smaller if you live in the city centre than the green areas. The challenges created by London's pollution problem, because we know there's more people, therefore there's more cars and more pollution, is that greenhouse gases are leading to climate change, and there's lots of congestion on the roads. That means that financially people are late to work, reducing their income, and also then people are experiencing health issues in London because the air is so polluted. So what is London doing to overcome this? They have park and ride schemes where you park on the outside of a city, you get the bus in, therefore reducing the number of cars on the road, reducing the challenge of pollution, and also reducing the number of people late to work because there's going to be less congestion. They've also put in this congestion charge in place, so it costs £11.50 a day to simply drive your car into London. Now, if you multiply that by 5, that is over £50 a week before you've paid for petrol, before you've even paid for parking. That is going to discourage people using their car, encourage them to use the park and ride scheme and public transport, therefore resolving the problem of pollution. And they've also installed cycle superhighways. superhighways dedicated to cyclists so that it's safer for them to travel and therefore they can get to work on time and be healthier, increasing their life expectancy. The final part of this is Urban World, our sustainable urban living. And we know that our example of sustainable urban living is the East Village, which was actually where the Olympians stayed during the Olympic Games in London 2012. That has since been converted to affordable housing for local people to live in. And it's really sustainable because they actually conserve water. They have grey water, which is water collected from rainwater. And that rainwater then is used for gardens and flushing toilets, meaning that you don't have to pay for fresh water. So it's excellent for the environment, but it's also really, really cheap. Energy conservation. They've all got double glazed windows and the majority of them are south facing. South facing meaning that they attract natural sunlight, therefore that's going to cost you less money to heat your home and therefore it will be cheaper for you in the long run, and it's also reducing the amount of CO2 needed to create energy through fossil fuels. There's also local shops in the area, so you can walk to the shop rather than needing your car, and you don't need to go to the supermarket. They also have a fantastic waste recycling scheme, so household waste is collected and recycling facilities are available. And finally, they have created ample green space around the area. That encourages people to exercise, which reduces pressure on the NHS, and it also reduces the risk of flooding in the area and increases biodiversity.